Fantastic. Alrighty. Hello, everybody, and thank you for waiting a little bit past our normal start time. That's never our actual start time for us to start. I am Washington Post reporter Nathan Grayson, and welcome to our weekly news show called Story Mode, where we talk about all of the latest video game news, typically joined by guests. Today, we're going to be talking about FaZe's plan to go public, and for that, I'm joined by two guests. There is TheStockGuy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Just a guy who likes to trade stocks. I've always been big into the economy, finances, macroeconomics, and love to be a cowboy trader. And I found a great home on Twitch, and it's built an amazing community and just my thing. I just like to speculatively trade, and I call it cowboy trading. And that's about it. I mean, just a regular guy who enjoys DJing a little.
And then we're also joined by Elizabeth. I'm going to butcher your last name, so you just say it.
Lopatto.
Lopatto. Okay. And yeah, so you're deputy editor at The Verge. What is your kind of like? I assume that you've been covering kind of at least the SPAC, or however you say that scene, but also like, have you been covering and following FaZe and things like that?
I've been following FaZe sort of from a distance in the way that an editor does rather than a reporter does. So I've been editing FaZe stories.
Mm-hmm.
And they do seem to have some pretty remarkable ambitions. So I wasn't entirely surprised that they were SPACing. I'm surprised they're SPACing this late.
Okay. Well, that's a good starting point, right? So for the uninitiated, what is SPACing? How does that work in the kind of grander scheme of companies going public?
Sure. So a SPAC is a special purpose acquisition company, which basically a group of people get together and they create a pile of cash and then they IPO the pile of cash. And that's pretty simple because there's like no business for the SEC to check. And there's, I'm oversimplifying, but just for this, rock with me. And you know, there's a period, and it's usually about 2 years, during which they find a business to acquire, and then that business that becomes the name of the company and it's publicly traded company, right? So you've been seeing a lot of this, especially in the EV market, electric vehicles. But there have also been a bunch of media SPACs as well. So besides the Trump SPAC that was announced last week, there's the BuzzFeed SPAC. There have been rumors about a Bustle SPAC, about Vice, although that might not happen. And then Group 9 has created its own SPAC. So the media space is kind of where the action seems to be, at least partially right now.
Oh, so that's such a big mug. I'm sorry. Yeah. So is that kind of your read on the situation too?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, for those who are unaware, you know, SPACs are a less are a much riskier way of going public, but there's less hoops to go through, right? So unlike your standard IPO where you have a large institution that does an underwriting and then you have, you know, your fees and they guarantee that the shares will be filled, which is, you know, more confidence to investors. SPACs are kind of the Wild West, right? Like it's kind of one of those things where it's like anybody can go. All you got to do is convince some blank check company who a bunch of people gave money to and said, hey, here's my money, make me more money. And so they mill around and they look for a company, they get their shareholders and said, what do you think about this one? Sure, let's do it. And then it's the Wild West. But the risk is insane. And, you know, the SPACs that we saw, as you were alluding to earlier, you know, a year ago, anybody could have gone via SPAC and made money. You know, you $10, you're $50. I mean, you're $100, CCIV. I mean, you could name them all. But now SPACs are kind of, you know, outside of the Trump one, SPACs are kind of, you know, the market's kind of cooled down. Retail traders are kind of moved out since the GameStop thing. People are going back to work. And institutions are coming in and they're looking at what happened in the 80s and 90s and saying, you know, do I really want to take that risk again?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
to
Go
speak
ahead.
to that, what happened in the 80s and 90s were a bunch of pump and dump schemes. And like there have been new regulations that have been put in the market since then. So theoretically they should be safer, but there has been also a bunch of SPAC fraud. So there's Nicola, whose founder, Trevor Milton, was recently indicted for fraud. There's Lordstown Motors, which is being frisked by the SEC for possibly misleading investors about pre-orders. You have Canoe, another recent SPAC, also under investigation, and the space startup Momentus has been charged for misleading investors in its SPAC. So it's kind of a weird time to SPAC instead of IPOing.
And so, yeah, I mean, like already in chat, I've seen some people say things like FaZe is not worth $1 billion, things like that. And so, I mean, why does that tie in at all to like why they're SPACing, why they're taking this less traditional, seemingly more risky route that involves less red tape that they'd have to cut through?
There are a couple of reasons why that might be attractive. One is that if you're SPACing, you don't have to do a roadshow to a bunch of different investors and convince them to like join your IPO. You just like have to convince one investor. So it's a little simpler. Another reason is that there are a lot of regulations about what you can and can't say in an IPO. So if you want to give like future projections, the SPAC is the way that you can do that. You can't really do that with an IPO. So I think those are the two most obvious reasons.
Yeah, and I agree. I think a lot of it, without obviously the FaZe Clan is well known in gaming, and Twitch is gaming. So obviously, on my end, I see this a little bit different. But I fully agree that I think that it's just simpler. And as you alluded to, and I'm not saying that they're doing anything maliciously, but you don't have to report, numbers and financials and stuff like that, because you're, like she said, you're not going through a large, established institution. It's just a blank check company. And because those same regulations and those same, intricacies of going public are not there, you can throw numbers around like $1 billion, and who's gonna say no? I mean, there's not much anybody can say. Like obviously, based on operating income and cash flow, it's $100 million. Let's just say, sure, we'll give it a 10. We'll slap a 10-time future valuation on it. I mean, hell, look at Tesla, right? Everybody will use that as an example. And then you just go live. And but I think we'll touch on this later. But I think FaZe, while this valuation is absolutely crazy, I think they might be on to something, in at least when the merger takes place. But I think we'll get to that later.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, sorry. I keep getting distracted by your fans, who are very amusing so far.
Don't tell them that. Please don't, please, because they're just gonna, oh no.
They're only gonna get worse. Okay,
No,
well
but
now
they
I
love
just want to
attention.
see.
They're not fans, trust me.
Oh, okay. They're more like your enemies who showed up to just kind of ruin your day.
No, they're just degens who were bored waiting on earnings, and they saw a cat, so now they're all like shiny thing. They're great.
Speaking of the cat, this is a huge digression, but what is your cat's name? We've seen it running around on screen. I've got to know.
Jeeves, like the butler. And yeah, she has like a real radar for when I'm doing something where she's going to appear on screen, and so she just likes to walk through and remind people she's there.
Oh yeah. No, I'm very familiar with that cat tendency. I have one of my own, and in a lot of cases, if I'm doing any sort of call, that's when they're like, okay, so this is about me now. I'm worried that we're not being about me. But no, to go back to what you were saying about kind of like SPACs being this way to, go public without revealing a lot of financial information, and, to maybe say like, okay, well, our valuation is X number without maybe showing as much as you would normally need to. Like, I guess my main question as someone who's not as initiated as either of you is like, why is this allowed? It feels like a thing that it feels like a means of, again, not saying FaZe is necessarily doing this, but it feels like a means of potentially getting away with, an amount of, I guess, misleading people that would not be great in the end for, shareholders and people like that.
I mean, I think in finance, there's a tendency to let people do things until there's like a very good, obvious reason not to let them do it. And so with SPACs in particular, there is this sort of checkered history. And like the other thing that maybe is worth keeping in mind is that returns on SPACs are historically not fantastic. But the thing that I noticed with FaZe is they actually have revenue. And so they're a little different from some of the EV companies we've seen that are going public based on basically projections only. So that's a positive. But as for why it's allowed, I mean, you'd have to talk to the SEC about that.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, you just said, like, as you pointed out, FaZe is generating revenue. I think they have what, 300 million in cash right now. And then they're also projected to pull in 50 million in revenue this year. But I mean, like, what is both of y'all's take on kind of their overall projected valuation? Like, that's still, you know, that's still quite a ways off from 1 billion.
For me, I mean, are we talking about true valuation or what the equity might actually end up being worth? Because we're talking, you know, I mean, it took Tesla, you know, how long before they were actually profitable, right? So, I mean, this market doesn't really care about actual valuations. It's going to be a difference between how much revenue can they generate. Now, let's talk about what FaZe is, right? You're talking about a esports organization in probably the fastest growing entertainment-wise sector in the world. I mean, video games, I mean, it's an ungodly business right now. I mean, cash, it's just hand over fist. I mean, Candy Crush makes $1 billion a year. I mean, when I found that out, that blew my mind. So, you know, video games, and especially with COVID and just the new work from home society, video games aren't going anywhere. Esports is exploding. But the problem is, for me, is that esports does not have the same fans loyalty and base that something like a real professional sports team does, right? So when you're putting a valuation on it, you're looking at long-term loyalty and competition and things like that. So when I look at this, I kind of see it and I'm thinking, yeah, FaZe is a big name for now, but how much competition is out there? How many esports orgs are there? How many more change? How many more games? And how does that sector evolve? So when I look at their true valuation, I could say, okay, if they were going to be the number one, keep bringing in the biggest names and just take over video games, sure, give them $1 billion in 10 years. But I don't see that. I see with the growth of that sector and that population and that people that are playing video games, I see more competition and more groups, which just dilutes it. And that's why I don't think that that's a true valuation, or at least any time in my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things that I have found a little unsettling about this market currently, all this year really, is that I noticed that stock price is not necessarily tied to anything anymore, because stocks are really easy to meme. And so one of the things that I notice about FaZe Clan is that it does have a fandom, and fandoms make it a lot easier for stocks to go meme. And so in that sense, I think that 1 billion is actually not crazy, because it's not impossible that like a bunch of people are going to YOLO into it.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely agree. I think that's what I was trying to allude to earlier. I absolutely agree. That's what I was going to say. The difference is true valuation versus market valuation. And in this case, you don't have to convince a bunch of people that are actually in this for the long term. You've got kids and people or young people or a huge audience out there that live stream that love you. All you got to do is have a good marketing campaign. Just talk it up. You don't even have to tell anybody to buy it. Just talk about, hey man, we're going public. You can own a piece of the company. You can be part of FaZe Clan. Right. You are a FaZe, whatever they call themselves. And now you got this excitement, and these kids buy it. They're not going to sell it because they're not buying it to make money off it. A lot of them are going to buy it just like if they're buying a shirt or some kind of merch, you know? Mm-hmm. And so in this case, I think that I totally agree with Liz. I think that it's a different play here. And I think they're actually, depending on how that merger plays out, I think there might be some potential for this, at least for a while, until somebody else comes along, somebody else goes public, and everybody just jumps the ship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, at that point, right, it becomes more of like if not a status symbol, then something kind of resembling that, right? Being like, you can tell your friends, you can be like, I own a small piece of FaZe Clan, which is like such an interesting way of interacting with stock. I mean, like, to what extent do you think, especially with kind of younger people in the gaming crowd, like the GameStop stock explosion kind of influenced this, or influenced people's tendency or desire to be like, hey, here's this thing like FaZe Clan, here's this other gaming associated thing. Maybe I'll put some money into that just for funsies.
Actually think this goes back to Tesla,
Mhm.
which like I have been watching the Tesla bear community for a very long time, partially because they are also a group that's pretty funny. And the Tesla bulls, like no offense to the Tesla bulls, but they say the same things over and over again, which is yay, stock going up. And like stock has gone up. They've mostly been right. Like fair enough. And the Tesla bears have been constantly frustrated by this and have been suggesting that the valuation doesn't reflect, what Tesla is truly worth. But to some degree, I don't know that that actually matters. And if you look at more recently at AMC, um, what ended up happening because a bunch of people yellowed into the stock was that they were able to get rid of a bunch of debt that they had convertible notes on. So like Silver Lake sold all their debt, turned it into stock, made a nice profit and got out. And like that made AMC actually able to survive the pandemic.
Mhm.
So there are a bunch of like strange market effects that are going on because of this sort of randomization of finance. I think FaZe is one of the kinds of brands that people might be interested in this way. And like, I don't know how long term that interest may be, and I don't know how successful FaZe may be in the future, but I think at least initially there's going to be some sort of like meme stock interest.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think out the gate we might see. I mean, we already saw it when they announced the potential for that merger. I mean, we saw the SPAC move. I mean, we saw it move 15-20% because people were getting in. Once the merger actually happens and it's called FaZe, that's when people are going to start buying in because now I own part of FaZe. Now the question becomes, how many people buy it, and then how many people hold it? I think that the novelty will probably wear off a while, and then the next meme coin will come along, and somebody will be like, "Oh my god, German Shepherd coin is 0.0000000001. I can buy 1 million of them with $25. Let me sell this." Or,
Mhm.
you know what? I don't like that one, but oh my god, Pug coin is so cute. I gotta buy it. You know what I mean? I feel like the same crowd that buys this is only gonna, it's like having a shirt, right? Like your
Mhm.
favorite shirt or your favorite like band, right? You may keep it forever, or you may toss it out when there's a new band that comes around, or when they have an updated shirt and you toss it, right? Like, I mean, I still have my Leonard Skinner shirt from the 90s, but the rest of them are gone. So I think short term there's potential for this to be, I think it's going to be like the SPACs last year. I think we're going to see this massive run, and then I think we just see cannibalization of retail traders on the way down.
Mhm. And so like when that happens, or if that plays out, then what happens to FaZe? What can FaZe do at that point?
Well, I think it's worth remembering that stock is ownership in a company, but it's not the same as the actual company itself, right? So like when GameStop did its big run, like that didn't necessarily change anything at the physical GameStop, except that a bunch of executives were like, how do we talk about this without committing securities fraud? Um, like straight up. But like for FaZe, the stock price is important, but it's not as important as actually focusing on the business in the long term. And like, I am not sure how you create longevity in the gaming community in the way that I think FaZe hopes to. I don't know that there's a model for that. So I'm really curious to see how this plays out over the next several years, because this is something I think most of us haven't seen before.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, that's assuming that they even allow it to go. I mean, there's still a few loopholes to get through, but for me, and I know I'll take a lot of hell for this because, sorry, excuse me, whatever. I'll take a lot
You take a lot of
of crap
heck.
for the. I'll take a
Yeah.
lot of crap for this because I'm on Twitch, but I think this is a disaster setting up. At least the way it's setting up right now, because
Mhm.
I feel like this is a SPAC, which is basically the cowboy, the cowboy public, way of going, with a brand new type of industry coming into the market that is a very tough to get a valuation on. Because how do you put a valuation on an esports team? Do you put it simply on cash inflow, Or do you put it on, you know, the sponsorships they bring in, how they perform, how their team is in and out? It's not like, you know, you look at a traditional company and say, okay, this is where our cash flow is going and this is what our projections are. There are no projections, you know? If you're a team that is reliant on sponsorships, you know, to bring in money, but you can't predict that one of your guys gets sick, one of your guys quits, one of them breaks up with his girlfriend, another one gets canceled for something, and now you don't make it to the big event, and now your sponsors pull out, right? Like, it's so difficult to do. So I feel like it's just going to be more name recognition in the short term. And until, you know, I mean, but the cool thing is that like I am as a stock streamer, they'll make the mistakes others will learn from as we go down.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you brought up kind of like, how do you determine what exactly, like what the valuation is, what the company itself is in terms of like where the value in it is. And I think that this was especially a thing about this that was especially revealing in like even initial reporting on FaZe going public, or at least planning to, was the way they described themselves. So on one hand, in kind of like their filings, they said that they were like, one of their bigger risk factors is that they're, let me see if I can find the quote really fast. They basically, though, you know, called themselves like an esports team, or reliant on a like relatively small number of content creators and esports players and things like that. Here we go. Let's see. It states that much of its business relies on a limited number of esports professionals, influencers, and content creators. But then when directly asked about this, FaZe's CEO Lee Trink said they were not just an esports brand, or that they were like, while esports is a really important part of our brand, it's a very minimal part of our business. So it's interesting that they listed that as a big risk factor when they're like, actually, though, no. Like, it all strikes me as a little bit like, yeah, it's really hard to pin down what exactly their deal is in this regard. I mean, like, what do you make of that? Because it just strikes me as so kind of bizarre.
Setting up for the
I
reverse
think
splits.
Oh, sorry, I think I've got a lag. I think they want money. I think that they are looking for investment, and this is a way to get investment, right? Because it's not just the SPAC itself and going public. There's, you know, the public or the investment in public equity, which is the PIPE. And I think that they're getting some of that too. So I wonder if what's actually happening here is this is sort of an opportunistic play to raise, which might have taken place in the private markets at some other point. But because there is this SPAC vehicle and this sort of like glut of companies, because there have been a lot of SPACs that have gone public that are looking for targets, and if they don't find a target, they have to give the money back to the people they raised it from. So they're like a little on the ropes, maybe. And so they're just opportunistically taking advantage of the fact that this exists in order to raise.
Yeah, actually, this is a good summary comment, I think. Let's see. D Cheed 921, which I think that like maybe it's the name of a celebrity, but whatever. Anyway, in chat says everyone wants esports clout and no one wants esports risk, which yeah, kind of makes sense to me, because esports is a really risky proposition. I mean, like, I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today who has pretty extensively covered the business of esports, and kind of a recurring trend that I think we've seen over time is that a lot of teams have taken on a lot of different forms of private investment, and have kind of tapped those faucets until they've run out. And the sort of like possible thing we could be seeing here, and maybe more of in the future with other teams, is the sort of move toward the public sector, because they're like, well, you know, we can't procure money elsewhere. This is ultimately a business driven by loss. And so, you know, after a while, people get tired of that. And they're like, well, then I'm done, you know, pumping this full of either VC money or whatever else.
Tell that to Uber investors.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, Uber is one thing. A relatively small esports company is another thing, right?
Well, I mean, like I said, this could end up going the way of some of the other SPACs, like Liz had talked about when it comes to like Nikola and others like that. I'm not accusing anyone of fraud in any way, but I'm just saying like the hype is there. I personally think that we see this cool off a bit ahead of you know, the merger. Then we see a huge spike. It might hold for a little while, and then people get bored of holding it. Like they're like, why am I holding this? Or do I really care? Or there's one big scandal, or another esports company says I'm going public, and then people, you know, it dilutes it. I could be wrong. I just, at least now, but then again, nobody really cares what the true valuation of something is. You know what I mean? I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, look at fine art, right? Or look at the NFT sector right now.
Mhm.
Something is worth what people are willing to pay for it. I mean, that's
Right.
what sets the value. This isn't the stock market. We have so many investors and traders now who are living 20 years in the past saying, well, the PE is this and the RSI is here and their EBITDA showed a positive cash flow. Nobody cares about that. People just want to make money. And now that you have retail traders and gamification and everybody with the phone, if my stock will go up, or I think this stock is going to go up, or if everyone's convincing me it's going to go up, I'm going to buy it. And how does the stock go down? People have to sell it. And if people aren't selling it, then it doesn't go down. And if people are only buying in bigger bulk, I mean, if you have more buyers than sellers, stock goes up. Tesla didn't turn a profit. And as of right now, it's a $1 trillion company. It's worth more than every other car company out there who sells vehicles.
Mhm.
Is it truly worth that? Well, if you go by how much value they have on their books, no. But are people willing to pay that much for it? Yes. So guess what? That's how much it's worth.
Hmm.
And I
Are,
think
are you,
one thing that's like worth thinking about here is the community aspect again, right? Like, one of the things about Twitch is that streamers generally have communities involved. And if you look at like NFTs or cryptocurrency in general, a lot of the community is reassuring each other that they're going to hold. It's rocket emoji, rocket emoji, rocket emoji. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
that's
Not,
what
not,
chat
not,
is
whoa,
saying right now.
sorry, not our community. We don't do. We're no.
You've
Not
never,
mine. Not mine.
not
We don't have any coordinated on anything. Just there's a bunch of degens that hang out. I just want to put that clear.
okay. That's
Hi
I don't
SEC.
think
Hi
it's like
SEC.
I don't think it's like a plot. I think it's just naturally people trying to reassure each other that their investment is worth something. I
Yeah.
don't think there's anything nefarious happening.
right. Right. I think you see that across like all sorts of different sorts of communities. Like it's far from just in one like this. I mean, even to really bring it to a very basic video game example, right? Like, for the longest time, you've had the concept of like the console wars in video games where people are like, I like this one, I like that one. And it's all these communities essentially reassuring each other that you purchased the right thing, that you put your money into the correct thing. And like, it's okay. You don't have to like stress about it. We're all on the same team or whatever. And I mean, this sounds like another version of that very like human tendency. I think that we seek comfort when we do things that feel like commitments. We're like, I did it right, didn't I?
Yeah, I find in our community, like I have one of those stock communities, right? Like you
Mhm.
think about those all the time. Mine is different because, like I said, I don't have one of those like we're all gonna buy this or this is what or do what I say or here's a course that I'm gonna make you rich or here's my great yacht. And I don't do any of that BS because I tell people every single day, all stream long, guys. We're all guessing. The more someone tries to convince you they know what's going to happen, the more they're trying to sell you something, okay? I'm guessing, Warren Buffett's guessing, everyone's guessing. Some people are better at guessing, some people have more money to move positions. But we're all guessing, and this is what I hear and this is what I think. But the cool thing about the community is there's so many sub-communities too, is that it's just an information sharing, right? Like, oh, did you hear about this? No, can you link me the article? Oh, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I also heard about this from that company from 6 months ago. Wow, let's put that together. Holy hell, look at what we've built up. They're on pace. AEHR is a stock, to give you an example. A year ago, when we started seeing the semiconductor shortages and supply chains, I started looking at companies that were smaller companies that would potentially be ones that could alleviate some of the stress from the bigger companies, right? Like Applied Materials and whatnot. So I was looking around and I was like, okay, they're going to have to outsource. Somebody's going to have to alleviate this. So I started finding little companies that were doing that. And I was keeping eyes on them. And one of them was this company, AEHR. It's a small company that makes wafers. And I saw a news article that one of their contracts got extended. So I started digging into it. And I was like, why are they getting an extension on their contract unless they're doing something right? And somebody else shared something and put it together. And I was like, wow, these guys might be the ones. So I bought a whole bunch at $4.73. It's up 700% since then. It's not us. We didn't coordinate that. But that's the kind of thing. You can kind of get ahead of things by using other people's experience, other people's knowledge, other people's fundamental analysis, and you build that together. And, it's kind of like the movie 21, but we're not card counting technically.
I mean,
We like
just
the stock.
right. I mean, just to like really interrogate this a little bit, where does it cross the line into coordination? Because I mean, like the beginning of coordination, at least from how I would view things, is information sharing. And like
No,
at what scale does that then become coordination? This is not to accuse you of anything, by the way. This
no,
is just to
absolutely. I'm not concerned at all
questions.
because I'm a very genuine person. Here's the thing about coordination. As the rules are written right now, you have to. It's not 100%, and there's a lot of gray area, but you have to be an accredited investor, right? You have to be a licensed investor, and then you fall under the SEC and the FINRA laws, right? If you're not an accredited investor, you didn't sign an ethical thing. You didn't make any kind of agreement with the government that you won't tell people what to do. And then everybody gets scared like, oh, this is not financial advice. Well, no crap. I mean, if financial advice would be somebody coming to you to pay you for financial advice for them specifically. If somebody on the internet says, hey guys, I think that Wish any other stock out there, some stock is going to go there. Okay, that's an opinion. If that person then says, hey, all the people who follow me voluntarily, you should buy it. And if we all buy it, it'll go up. Well, is that illegal? No, that's just how supply and demand works. I mean, you're literally telling everybody, you're not forcing anybody. No one's paying you for that information. You're not doing anything illegal. And the only person who is if somebody who took an oath or wrote down in a piece of paper, I will not do this. You didn't do that. So technically, it's not illegal. Now, there is some fine lines and gray areas where if you charge people for information that could be considered something, or you have inside knowledge, or there's some legalities there. But just the idea that somebody with 500,000 Twitter followers says, hey, if everybody buys Wish and holds it, it'll go to $35 because people have to cover the shorts. Okay? We should all buy this. Okay.
I would just add to that, like, one of the reasons that you haven't seen charges in GameStop is that it was an open pump and dump. Like, no one was lying. Like, that's like what's required, like if somebody had been lying about, GameStop, like that would be illegal. But it's not illegal to say, I like the stock and buy the stock. It's not illegal to make dumb trades. It's not illegal to do a lot of things that we're seeing starting to happen as a result of these internet communities. Like, I really think that, if your interest is internet communities, in ways, I think Reddit is like dead at the epicenter of this. And I don't just mean Wall Street bets, but I mean on specific stocks as well. That seems to really, something about that algorithm seems to really push people towards thinking about this stuff more than they might otherwise. And I think that that's also part of what you're seeing is like a lot of people who are talking to each other, saying the same things to each other, and then acting on that.
Wall Street Bets has been infiltrated, though. It's probably just bots and hedge funds trying to get stuff in. They buy a big position and then make a bunch of accounts and say, hey, buy this,
Right. Now that seems more directly manipulative.
But how do you prove it, right? How do you prove it? I mean, it's all about not what you know, it's about what you can prove, and there's not much that you can do out there. I mean, like I said, coordinated things are it's just part of the system. I mean, what one of the most successful things that has been happening recently is there is a group of people who are shadow trading Nancy Pelosi. This is a real thing, and we started following it because Nancy Pelosi's husband started making large option plays on big tech companies. And it turned out a lot of them were taken out right before big votes came up. Now, can you prove that she told her husband about this? Can you prove her husband knew? Can you prove any of that? Nope. And until you can, what do you do? And even if you can prove it, remember that group of representatives who had that coronavirus meeting before the COVID outbreak and they dumped all their stocks? And guess what? Market crashed and they were out. The people who had the knowledge before everybody else. Do they get in trouble? No, because they've given themselves immunity. I mean, when you write the laws, you can exempt yourself from the laws. So, who is going to do what? I mean, this is all one big scam. It always has been. But now the regular people found out about how to do it. And now the people who have been benefiting it from the longest time are pissed off because the secret's out, the game's up, and they know they're just going to sit back because they know the retail traders will eventually go broke or go back to something else, and they'll go back to their ways and nothing will change.
Yeah, everyone in chat is saying that now an FBI agent is going to come after you. They've said,
this is funny because we actually, The Verge is having its 10th birthday party on November 1st on the website. And I actually have written something much like what we're discussing right now about exactly this phenomenon. And I do think that like there is an element to which trading has really been demystified, because one of the things that you notice is that like, you know, there's the notion of animal spirits, but for the last couple decades, I would say we've avoided talking about the emotional aspects of trading. And like what you see with retail traders is very much emotional trading. Like this is a bet that's fun. That's like the whole thing. And so, you know, if you're a hedge fund, or at least if I were a hedge fund, which I'm not, but if I were, I wouldn't necessarily try to manipulate the retail traders so much as I would just keep track of their sentiment, because you can do a lot of things, including like high frequency trading, where you make money no matter what happens. And so if you know there's going to be a lot of velocity on a stock, for instance, that might be one for you to pay attention to and like do some arbitrage things that are not available to the rest of us.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, in terms of all of this, in terms of like, you know, a stock that looks good or like is something to maybe like go into trading, like, is there any chance at all that, given kind of, again, FaZe's status as this trendy thing or whatever, that it will result in being something good to go into, that it will gain a lot of momentum out the gate? I mean, especially given that, like, I think one of the things you see like them throwing around is the idea that they're a brand popular with like Gen Z, like younger people, and there's all this interest now in like, how do we, you know, get at younger crowds? How do we ensure that we can sort of, you know, profit off this new generation? Like, do you think that FaZe ends up in a good place initially, such that, you know, they can like build on momentum that they have out the gate for a while?
For me, no. I mean, for me, I'm already planning on potentially buying it and then selling it to the kids coming in on the way up. Let them bag hold it if they want, because here's my thing. Why is TikTok so popular? Why is YouTube blowing up with YouTube Shorts? Why has this happened? We don't have attention spans anymore. We are completely, the new generations especially, but even our generations are so short term, and we're so inundated and overstimulated that we need things to move, right? I watch thousands and thousands of traders every single day in my community buy something, it doesn't go to the moon immediately, they sell it. Or after a week, it hasn't mooned, they haven't made 10, 15, 20, 100%, and they get rid of it. And then it moons, and they get into something else, and it does the same thing, and it's over and over and over again, right? This is why retail traders are retail traders, and they're short term, because they get busted out, because they think it's a casino. And it is in a way, but I like to invest in the total market. Why play in the casino when you can invest in the casino, right? So I'll just invest in the casino, and maybe on the weekends throw a few bucks here and there and have some fun, but leave it at that. And because of that, I think you add that, younger generations and video game, and the fact that esports are a dime a dozen nowadays. I think people get in initially. It's a hip new niche, like shiny new object, and it's hip. And then, you know what? I get bored, I sell it for some other stupid coin, or another esports team goes public, and I'll dump my money in there, right? That's how I think it is. There'll always be bag holders that'll be, you know, just like the ACB bag holders from when the pot stocks went in 2017. So, you know, I mean, that's just my personal opinion. I think we see, just like my viewership on Twitch, I think we see a large spike and then just dies off.
Damn.
So
I mean, oh yeah, go ahead.
you know, I'm not going to predict the future here, because if I were good at predicting the future, I would not be an internet typist. You know,
Yeah,
like
same.
just playing to my strengths here. But one thing that I do think that people should read, it's a book. It's called Where Are the Investors' Yachts? And it was written about 50 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, and it's still the truest thing I've ever read about Wall Street. And it's everything you need to know about how Wall Street actually works, which is that, like, if you own the casino, you make the money, and otherwise you're kind of screwed. You can lose your money slowly or you can lose it quickly, but you're not going to get the yacht.
So StockGuy, where's your yacht?
I wouldn't own a yacht. I have a merch that I sell. It's a 3F, so it depends on the crowd you're in. What that stands for. It could be friends, family, and faith, or it could be, if it F's or F's, rent it, don't buy it. And so, in my opinion, there is no reason to buy a boat. I would never buy a boat. I live in Florida, and I would never own a boat. Let me tell you why. You're going to pay all that money to own it. maintenance, gas, dock fee, and everything like that to go out 1 weekend a month. You know what? Why would I spend all that money? I could just go hire somebody for 1/10 the cost to take me out on their boat and deal with all the BS.
That's fair. Man, this
Don't
is
tell
good
my wife
financial
I said all
advice.
this, though.
Yeah, no, that's some like real world financial advice. If ever I like somehow, I don't know, trip and fall into a hole full of money, I will not use it to buy a boat.
Well, here, I'll make you a deal. I took Amazon puts through earnings. I was going to sell for 30% gain. I diamond hands it. It's down $156 a share right now. I should be up about 500% in the morning. I'll take that money. And if you ever come into Miami, I'll take you out on a boat. How about that? Don't come
I
to
feel like
Miami.
that may, per the standards of journalistic ethics, be not allowed. But I appreciate the
But aren't
offer.
we technically both technically in the same industry?
Yeah, in kind of a roundabout way.
Yeah, I mean, we're both entertainers.
You know, I
just realized that by me
correctly.
inviting somebody I've never met out on a boat, I sound like I'm a serial killer.
A little bit. I mean, either that or a mobster.
I just
In
totally
which
went
case,
Dexter on you. Like, I was trying to be nice and then realized that was creepy as hell. Hey, mister that I've never met before till 15 minutes ago, come to
Come to
Miami
my
and let's
boat?
go out on a boat together.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's either that or organized crime. I mean, either thing, right, would be very good for your reputation.
I mean,
Now,
unless
the
you got $1 billion.
FBI has definitely entered the chat.
Oh, yeah. No, it's just all FBI agents now. Like, chat jumped up like 20 people, and all of them work for the FBI. They're like, all right, now we got him.
But we're
Let's
sitting at
go.
69 viewers.
We've gone over, unfortunately. So we're going to have to ban some people to get it back down.
Unfortunately, we have more viewers than usual.
But yeah, so again, to kind of go back to FaZe for a minute, is any of this stuff that they're talking about that sort of like represents for them, you know, growth potential or like any number of other things, like, is any of it relevant? Because, for example, they talk about like they could expand into China because like things like League of Legends are popular over there, despite the fact that FaZe does not have a good team in that regard. Or like they again, like the Gen Z stuff, like they talk about all these things that could be good for them. But I mean, does any of it matter at the end of the day, or is it really just they are FaZe, they have a built-in audience, people know the name, people will at least like be kind of interested initially, and that'll be enough to sort of, you know, keep them going for a little bit? Like, basically, is there any play they could make here that would actually be viable or good, or are they just kind of, you know, flying by the seat of their pants?
Well, I think it depends on what they do with the money. Because again, like my personal feeling here, this is probably an opportunistic way to raise and maybe let some other early investors out, which is nice for the early investors. I hope they made a good profit. So I don't necessarily know like what their business decision is going to be with that money. Maybe it's recruiting more celebrities. Like we had, wasn't Offset? Didn't he join FaZe Clan for a hot minute? Do I remember that? It was like 2019.
Here, wait.
But like,
I mean, yeah, they have a lot of celebrity associations, so that's probably correct.
Yeah, so I think that, you know, that's one way for them to like try to boost interest and boost their relevance while they put together something. But I honestly don't know what the future looks like for them because esports is such a hard nut to crack.
Oh yeah, and you're correct. Offset did join them.
Oh, making me look bad. I didn't even know that, but I don't keep up with it as much. For me, I think, you know what? If you were to say, TSG, listen, you now have $1 billion hedge fund, or $1 billion blank check company, and you could bring an esports company public. In my FaZe would not be on my radar. Maybe 100 Thieves, maybe, you know, one of those that have like a more positive brand, a more built-in, you know, management system, you know, where you kind of see what they're doing. Like I could see that. Like for me, I think FaZe has, you know, I don't know about now, but their reputation has not exactly been great. And we know that in today's society, especially with investors, public relations is absolutely critical. You see stocks dip all the time off of somebody doing something bad, whether it's legit or not. I mean, look at Activision, right? I'm not saying FaZe Clan is going to have an Activision moment. Please don't like make that connection. What I'm trying to get at is that Activision, you know, had this guy culture, and then it was kind of like hush hush, and then all of a sudden it came out and investors fled like crazy, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't get in until they started firing those people. We see it all the time. We see hacks, we see these things. And I would say that I may be wrong now because I don't keep up with them, but if their past performance as far as controversies continue in the future, that would make it too even if they had a good business model, it would make it too unpredictable for me in a business where that is, I mean, where do they make their money? From sponsorships. And if you turn toxic or you have a big controversy, sponsors pull out. I mean, remember what happened with Facebook when they had the adpocalypse, and YouTube and Google, right? They tanked. I mean, of course, they're
Mhm.
bigger companies with, you know, were able to overcome it, but that would be my concern. And I would go with somebody who has a little bit more of that cleaner reputation.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like this
I'm
is
gonna
an
get in trouble. My agent's gonna call me after this.
um, yeah, no, I mean, like that is interesting though, right? Like FaZe over the course of its lifetime, I think, has accrued a pretty big number of like at least minor scandals or like minor controversies, to perhaps a greater degree than other esports teams or organizations or gaming culture organizations, whatever you want to call them. They're kind of they run a gamut at this point. But I
Correct
mean,
me if I'm wrong, but didn't they just have something with like NFTs or coins or something?
yeah, they had so basically some of their members, according to FaZe Banks, who like is one of the main people there. This was not organized by FaZe, but yeah, some of their members were part of a crypto pump and dump scheme, and yeah, that sort of came to light. I think that those people were dropped from FaZe Clan, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, but as
Uh,
an investor, you're like, wait, didn't we just have a controversy with
right.
the Tfue thing, or didn't we have this with a girl with allegations? Like I mean, you can cut people, but if you have a a reoccurring theme of
Mhm.
because obviously whoever is at the top of that business is not vetting people correctly or is not having control because it keeps happening. You can get rid of this person, but if it happens again, it means something's wrong. And as an investor, that doesn't make me want to put my money in that company for the long term, unless I'm just
Mhm.
gambling, you know?
Right. Right. Well, yeah, I mean, like, so that is one of those things then where like because I think like for a time people sort of looked at FaZe as this, like FaZe is sort of ubiquitous as far as these sorts of organizations go, and I think that it seemed like to an extent they were sort of bulletproof when it came to controversy because it kept happening, and in some ways I think it sort of increased their appeal, right? Because
Which
like
one?
they were already seen. Oh, FaZe.
Oh,
Because
okay.
like they were already seen as kind of edgy, right? And when you do things online that reinforce that image, then it's like, oh well, they're the one that's not afraid to like do things or say things or get their hands dirty. But then this now seems like a moment where that's sort of coming home to roost, where
Yeah.
like after all this time of kind of not getting away with things necessarily, but doing some things that are questionable and then emerging kind of relatively unscathed, it seems like this could actually really impact them now monetarily.
Oh, absolutely, especially when that.
Oh, one of the things that I keep thinking about is YouTubers, because I
Mhm.
think there's a parallel there, right? Like, there were a whole bunch of YouTubers who had scandal after scandal after scandal after,
Mhm.
and they just seemed bulletproof. It didn't matter. And then there was the one scandal that cracked that, and then it was like, and they've had all of these other scandals, and then it was like, okay, they need to go away for a while.
Mhm.
And, thinking about FaZe, like maybe they've been bulletproof up till now, but will they be bulletproof for the next scandal? Like you're spinning a roulette wheel, really. Like you don't know when public opinion is going to turn.
Mhm. Well, yeah. Let's see.
And a lot
Um,
more eyeballs on you when you become publicly traded too.
right.
You don't get to just have your fans in your little bubble of live streaming and certain websites to defend you, and everybody already knows who you are. The people who love you are going to stay with you. People who already hated you still hate you. Nothing changes. But when you are out in the public eye and CNBC's covering you and you're listed on an exchange,
Hmm.
all of a sudden the world knows about it, and that is a much bigger microscope to be under.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Um, and that's also kind of a good note to sort of wrap up on. That said, if anybody in chat has any real non-meme questions, um, ask away. I worry about what we're going to get here, but I'm also interested to see if
I
anybody
saw there
has.
was one guy in chat who's very upset about what we're saying, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, he's really upset about it. I apologize to that man. I hope your shares do well.
Yeah, because I only saw people earlier being like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna be like a degen about it and just go in."
No, it's the guy who just
said
said 30-year-olds shouldn't be reporting on FaZe. All they're doing is trashing it without knowing. Yes, that is exactly what we're doing. We are. You got us, buddy. We don't understand their act.
I haven't been covering this for like 2 years or anything. Like, I definitely don't know what's going on.
Oh yeah, okay.
Listen, you don't own a FaZe shirt. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, FaZe up.
This would be a great moment for one of us to like turn around and reveal just like a shrine to FaZe behind us, like a ton of shirts.
I have two things. I have our Lord and Savior, Saint Jerome Powell, right here, as you can see, and also for good luck, Peyton Manning. He always watches over.
But yeah, then like get like a little FaZe hat for one of them, and you'll be set. Then no one will ever doubt your credibility again.
Hey, listen, if you're gonna buy it and it runs, go for it. If you don't listen. There's always one phrase that I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
No FOMO. Okay, no FOMO. Just you got this.
All right. Well, that's beautiful. That's I think actually a perfect note to end on. No FOMO. But yeah, I'd like to. We're going to transition into another segment in a moment. So people who are watching, don't leave unless you're entirely here for the stock guy. In which case, I guess leave. I don't really. It's fine.
Wow.
But yeah.
And I'm not mansplaining anything, guys. Stop it.
Wow. How dare you just come in here and mansplain this whole time? Just dominate this conversation.
Apparently I'm mansplaining to somebody. I have no idea, but they're trying to rile me up, and I'm not gonna let it happen. But thank you so much for having me. It was fun. It was last minute, but this was a fun conversation. Great to meet both you, Liz. It was a pleasure. Would love to do an interview with you again. I think you got a really cool way of looking at it. You're coming at it from a different angle that I don't get to see all the time. So it was a pleasure to be with you, and I really appreciate everything. So guys, good luck and stay green.
Yep. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. My cat, I know, appreciates the opportunity to get a larger audience at all times. So she's very happy about this. It was lovely chatting with you both. This is fun.
Yeah, I was also very happy to help build your cat's brand. That is generally what I try to do in most of my work. But yeah, in any case, again, we're about to move on to just kind of wind down for the stream. But in the meantime, y'all can take off. It was good talking to you, and I hope to talk to you again in the future.
Same. Palantir to the moon.
Alrighty. Yeah, so for the uninitiated, which is probably most of you, we kind of wind down the weekly stream with an overview of other stories that happened this week, other video game news related stuff. Hopefully some of it will be relevant to you. If not, I don't know, just keep memeing about stocks. It's fine. Have a good time if you're bored. But yeah, so to start that off, so another major thing that happened this week was kind of the continuation of the controversy around Valkyrae, the YouTuber and streamer launching a blue light skincare line, which basically, as soon as she launched, it was kind of immediately debunked by people who work in dermatology and fields around that. And yeah, so then that spilled over into just the whole thing around people kind of like piling onto her, in some ways justifiably so, because again, she supported a product that is, for lack of a better term, a little bit scammy. But yeah, I ended up writing a piece that published today, kind of more about how like the controversy unfolded such that after a while it became kind of not really useful anymore. Like up to a certain point, it's certainly good to hold people online accountable. But the problem is that after a while, it stops being about anything other than people making content. So you had this sort of situation where initially people said, yeah, there's all these studies and all this research that shows that at least so far, no one's figured out that like blue light really has any impact on people's skin. So why are you making products around it? Why are you trying to make money off of it? It seems like a bad move to make. But then it sort of moved into this territory of streamers being like, of other streamers being like, either you've got to support her or not support her. Why aren't you supporting her? Why are people still supporting her? It's bad to do that. You've got to be like a good friend to her and support this product or not. And it's devolved into like people turning this into content to the point where like Hassan and Mizkif had this back and forth about it, where they basically said like Mizkif kind of like wound up saying some like supportive things to Valkyrae, and then Hassan was like, well, you know, you're only doing that for content. Yeah, he was like, let's see. He literally watched her stream, farmed drama, then called Ray to continue farming drama, and then became the savior while this, I can't curse on the stream, I'm sorry. It's on me. He's doing content was basically like the point. And that's what this devolved into, right? It's just people doing content because that's what they always do in situations like this. And how much can you learn from that? How much can like a giant crowd of people hold anyone accountable, or like any companies who are behaving sketchily, when they just go after a figurehead like Valkyrae and then kind of like make content out of it and then move on to the next thing that there is to make content about it after everyone gets bored? Like, what did we really learn from any of this? I'm not sure that we've really learned much. And in the meantime, the industries and companies responsible just get to keep doing their thing. And we don't really figure out like, hey, how do we stop this from happening again in the future? Because God knows it is happening. Like, let's see. So yeah, a lot of creators have collaborated with like gambling companies, like we were saying earlier, crypto pump and dump schemes on the side of FaZe Clan, even like lesser things that aren't quite as dangerous to viewers, like blue light glasses, which also don't really have much science behind them. Esports performance wear, which is like, what does that really do? You can use a mouse and keyboard either way. You're going to be fine. And yeah, so like these things are happening. Oh yeah, and of course, most of all, like Instagram is just all wellness scandals all the way around. And so yeah, it's just this question of like, how do people at large prevent any of this from happening? And if we're all just caught up in these constant cycles of discourse and drama, are we doing anything at all, or does it just feel like we're doing something? And to me, I think it's more the latter. It just feels good, but it doesn't really go anywhere. I don't know if any of you in chat followed the whole Valkyrae saga. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, just because I feel like I had a very particular view of it and reporting on it, and then eventually hearing from like the companies involved, which got very mad at me. They ended up reaching out and giving various statements. In this case, I guess they've decided that they're okay with Valkyrae kind of checking out of this whole thing, or like, I guess, deciding to move on from supporting this product. But I get the impression that they were not always down with that. But at any rate, other Twitch-related stuff in the meantime. So Twitch is launching a paid boost experiment, where basically the idea is that fans of streams, people in chat, can go in and spend an amount of money by way of Twitch's proprietary bit currency to boost the stream, to give it more visibility on Twitch's front page, which on one hand, like, you know, streamers need all the visibility they can get. I'm sure that, like, to use an example, y'all could do this for StockGuy pretty easily and get more viewership, at least temporarily. But on the other hand, it's this weird thing of like, Twitch clearly has a problem with people being able to find new streamers. It's a hyper-saturated platform. There are millions and millions of streamers. I believe the total number last time anyone checked was like 9 million streamers. And the ratio of streamers to viewers is much worse on Twitch than it is on basically like on for example, YouTube. YouTube has a viewership that is much, or a total viewership that's much greater proportionally speaking than the number of people creating. Whereas Twitch is just like, it's a very close ratio. And so you have that problem. And instead of like finding ways to more directly solve it, Twitch is saying like, okay, well, if your viewers pay us, we'll help you with our problem, which feels not great. And so when Twitch first announced this back in September, people were like really mad about it, to the point where it felt, for a moment at least, like Twitch was going to say, okay, maybe we should just scrap this one. It's not going to work out. But instead they delayed it. They delayed the test of it, and now they've launched it. So they're doing a limited run test with 100 some odd streamers who are going to be able to have this ability. And I guess they're just going to see how it works out. My bet is that it's not going to go super well. I think for a couple reasons. One is, again, it's already very unpopular. When they just even made the announcement they're going to try it, people lost their minds. And then also, like, this isn't really the way that people discover new streamers. It's not the way that people try to find them, right? Like, people will kind of casually look at the front page sometimes, but that's not really where they go. They mostly go through like categories and directories. And this, I don't think, is going to really have like a bearing on them. So this feels like a weird move on their part, and like one where it's just like people are just going to be mad and then not care, which is not at all what you ever want. You don't want people to go from angry, we hate this and we're mad at you, to now we no longer care and we're not going to use this. Like, that's every possible end of the spectrum of this didn't work. So that seems to me like a misstep. I guess we'll see, but I don't know. Like, again, to put a question in the chat, would any of you boost a streamer that you like? Would any of you like hop on this train of saying, okay, I'm going to spend X number of dollars in an attempt to like put this streamer temporarily on the front page, or like in a better, more prominent place? So I mean, oh yeah, and another important detail: would you do that such that none of that money goes to the streamer? It all goes to Twitch, the company who already has the power to just put that streamer wherever they want to. They're just only doing it if you pay them. Like, yes, correct. Yeah, Kevman, you are correct. It all goes to Twitch, which is doubly funny, right? Because like right now, the kind of system is that people can subscribe to streamers or cheer them with bits, which is basically donating to them. And I would feel like if you're somebody who watches a streamer, any money that you put toward boosting that stream probably comes out of what you would have normally spent on a sub or a dono, right? And so like that's basically, in addition to everything else, Twitch indirectly taking money out of the pockets of streamers, or money that like would have gone to them. Like, can you prove that it would have gone to them? Probably not. But like, it just kind of makes sense on paper, right? Like, only if it's me streaming. All right, well, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna, dust off my Twitch account and then like ask the Washington Post to just constantly give me money that way. I'm gonna be like, I don't want paychecks anymore. I just want subs and donos. That's not true. Please keep paying me. But anyway, yeah. So it's just all a weird system, and I don't know. I feel like I think that what'll probably happen, honestly, is Twitch will do this test, and they'll be like, "Yep, didn't really work," and then they will move on. At least if they're going to be smart about it. I don't know. We'll see. Other things that happened this week. Yeah, right. See, again, like Nick Brogan just said, you'd rather gift subs. Of course you would, because that like builds the community. Like that gets the community really hyped up, and like nobody. I don't think anyone has ever been unhappy about receiving a gifted sub. It just, that's already a better system. So I don't know. It just seems redundant on top of everything else. Oh, great. For those in chat who don't know, Mike Hume, who just said noted, Nathan Law is my boss. So I guess I just changed my pay structure. Well, what a life. Anyway, in further news of what happened this week in video games, Bobby Kotick, the head of Activision, has agreed to take a major pay cut in the midst of kind of the Activision Blizzard scandal surrounding sexism and other similar issues within the company. So basically what he's contending is that he was, and this is not incorrect, making a ton of money, and that he would rather those resources diverted into improving company culture and dealing with the problems of sexism and harassment and other similar issues, instead of just that money going straight to him. But there's some issues with that. So, I mean, for one, this does, like, on paper, seem like a lot, because Bobby Kotick has made hundreds of millions at Activision Blizzard over the past handful of years, basically via a mixture of his salary, which is relatively low compared to how much he makes, and then stocks and equity. That's where, and then performance bonuses based on how the company performs. Those bonuses have made him a whole lot of money. Like, that's the difference in any given year between him making like a couple $1 million, I think, which is what his salary was for a while. And like, I think that when those bonuses work out, which they have in recent years, like hundreds of millions of dollars, he's saying that he's not going to have any of that come to him for a little bit. So basically his exact quote was, To be clear, this is a reduction in my overall compensation, not just my salary. I am asking not to receive any bonuses or be granted any equity during this time. So he's dropped his salary down to $62,500, which is, quite low. That's the lowest that it could be cut under California law, which again seems like a lot, but is less significant when you consider that A, he is already a multi-hundred millionaire, and B, that anybody in his position makes most of their money, and again, leftover stock guy people probably understand this, investing and stocks. So I mean, his money is already doing the bulk of what it's going to do in terms of growth elsewhere. The company performance at this point is just like, it's a cherry on top, especially when he's going to reinstate his actual pay again later. This is a temporary measure. It's performative. It's a gesture. So I mean, like, this is the sort of movement that looks important and looks significant, but then you kind of dig down into the ramifications of it, and it's just sort of like, it still doesn't really address the primary issues within the company culture, which were allowed to evolve and grow and become so severe on Bobby Kotick's watch, and under the watch of a bunch of other people that he had a role in selecting or appointing. And then sure enough, if you look at like their plans to address other complaints from Activision Blizzard employees, and also it should be noted from the government bodies currently investigating the company, those plans involve a lot of the leadership that Bobby Kotick and others like him have put into power. So he's saying, like, in the coming months, Brian Blatau, who used to be part of the Trump administration, Julie Hodges and I will share details about how we are operationalizing, what a fun word, these goals and implementing and measuring this expanded investment. So, it's not promising, especially given that, as of like a couple, or like last week, Activision Blizzard has been trying to wriggle out of the investigations against them by way of legal technicalities. Like, you don't need to be a genius to see where their priorities actually lie. They're saying one thing and doing another. Let's see. Oh yeah, to go back to a previous subject, view botting is against the TOS, but yields the same effect. Yeah, on Twitch. I mean, there's also like legal view botting, right? Like, there's a channel called Fexter Life that is pretty notorious for this, where they just they post, basically they own a bunch of wikis and they post their streams and that boosts their view count through the roof. There's all sorts of ways to view bot on Twitch and get away with it. It's not good. But anyway, speaking of Activision Blizzard, they're also like reimagining BlizzCon this year. That makes sense. This is just more of a footnote in that story, right? Because like, of course, they're not going to do BlizzCon the same way going forward, because like BlizzCon has been a massive liability for them. BlizzCon is one of the main places at which the biggest stories of harassment took place. So whatever BlizzCon ends up being in the future, it will probably not greatly resemble the BlizzCon of the past. For this one, they're just skipping BlizzCon Online, which is like their online version of it they made during COVID, because like I think that any version of even like BlizzCon Online would put a ton of heat on them, and they don't want to deal with that right now because they're already trying to navigate this entire situation they found themselves in, involving, government entities and major issues of harassment and sexism. So that makes sense. In other news, kind of pertaining to video games, I think more so than maybe people give it credit for, Facebook renamed itself today. It's now Meta, because they're really committed to the metaverse, which is their whole initiative to, let's see if I can explain this. The metaverse is the idea of a new stage of the internet that's more directly immersive and that somehow ties together a bunch of brands and companies and virtual spaces such that you can like interact with them more directly, and it's like better than just scrolling online and stuff like that. It is something that we have covered in the past. I think that I am much more of a skeptic of the metaverse than perhaps at least our reporter who previously did a story on it, Gene Park, who, it must be said, like, love him. He's a great guy. I just don't really agree with him on this. But yeah, so like Facebook is trying to make the metaverse. And so their version of that, their envisioning of it, was on display today. And it's just this sort of thing where, like, on one hand, they have these very grand visions for it. But on the other hand, the reality of that is so mundane. Like, let's see. yeah, it's pretty telling that Facebook is building their entire rebrand around the metaverse concept, and the best use case they could think of is a virtual reality business meeting. Which, like, yeah, I mean, let's think about that for a second. Like, who among you, who among us, very bold sounding proclamation. But no, like, anybody in chat, would you actually want to use this? Would you want to go to a business meeting in VR? Is that just something like that you think about and say, oh man, yeah, that would be so cool? Or is your inclination to be more like, man, even getting on a Zoom call is already exhausting for me. So why would I want to go through all this hassle for a thing that like isn't even, you don't even get to see the actual people you're involving with. You have like virtual avatars, and it's just like it's another layer of like obfuscation instead of it being convenient. It's more things you have to do. And like if you're in a work situation, you're already doing a lot of things that you find tedious. Why would you want to do this other thing that like I'm sorry, like maybe the virtual workspace is like fun to be in, and you can, interact with things and wear virtual clothes and buy outfits or whatever. But like the process of setting it up, putting on a VR headset, opening the program on your computer, all the like making sure your VR is set up correctly, all these little things are extra steps in an already work driven, tedious process. And so it's just one of those things of like, who is this for? Who's going to use this? Who will enjoy this? And I think right now, like, I'm not convinced that anyone really will. I think that this is not unlike all the other attempts to create these kind of like Ready Player One style virtual spaces where people like live their lives, right? Like people have already done this before. They did it with Second Life way back in the day, and Second Life certainly like has a built it, like it gained an audience, but it's a small niche audience of people who mainly like it because they can go there and create things, and that's fun for them. It's not because they're like brands present and you can use it for meetings or whatever. No one does that. And like you want a really like kind of direct version of this. Sony tried to make a thing like this for the PlayStation 3. They made PlayStation Home in like the mid 2000s, and it tanked. Nobody used it. The idea was that it would be much like the metaverse is claiming to be, albeit on a smaller scale, a sort of central space on their platform where all of these other gaming properties, all these brands basically, could come together and interact, and users could interact with them as a whole, as opposed to in like discrete games and in discrete spaces. And no one liked it because this isn't really a thing people find interesting or fun. Like, I mean, it's this sort of, and I'm going to switch away from this tab because I'm tired of watching Mark Zuckerberg's face. But yeah, it's this sort of idea that only sounds good on paper. But when you start mapping out the reality of it, it becomes this thing of like, okay, who's this for? Who's going to use it? Like, yeah, so here's Mark Laidlaw, Mike Laidlaw, sorry, who used to work at BioWare, I believe. I always get him and Mark Laidlaw confused. One of them worked at BioWare, the other one worked at Valve. Anyway, he says, I work in games and still look at the concept of metaverse as a fantasy. One company should not own, control, produce all entertainment, and licensing deals are madness incarnate. So the thought of everything, everywhere, for everyone sounds like toxin-laced snake oil to me. And I mean, like, yeah, I think that that's a pretty solid read so far, unless something majorly changes in like the coming years. And I mean, if any company could will major change in like laws and licensing into existence, it would be Facebook, since they already control half the world. But if that doesn't happen, then like I just don't really see how this pans out in a way that actually succeeds on a like population level, like with normal people. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah. In chat, Flying Elk, who I believe is our producer, but whatever, says this current version of the metaverse is too time intensive, an extension of the issues VR currently faces with little payoff. And that's the other thing, right? I think somebody else on Twitter earlier today made the good observation of like, what Facebook is selling right now, what they're peddling is the idea of a more immersive internet, but that like immersion, per the standards of video games at least, is not just like slapping on a VR headset. Like, there's this idea in the tech world that anything that's more realistic or that brings you closer to the action intrinsically makes it more immersive. And that's just not true. There are plenty of hyper realistic video games and VR games that like are not that immersive. that are in fact distracting in various ways, or that, go too far and enter the uncanny valley. Meanwhile, there are plenty of games that are hyper lo-fi that people like are way into, that, either they really love the story and the world, or like they found some other element of it to be super important to them or life-changing. There are people who've dated each other in MMOs. There are games like Undertale that have amazing stories that people care about years past the time when they play them. All these things are like very immersive. You don't need to put on a headset for that. This is why, again, VR is kind of a niche, because it's a lot of work for less payoff than you'd expect. To bring things around to the Washington Post again, this is Gene Park, who wrote our piece on the metaverse, and who also brings up the point of kind of, Facebook's issues right now, human trafficking, spreading anti-vax conspiracies, subverting elections, all these problems. And yeah, Gene said, yep, as I've written and said before, the metaverse's problems are going to be the same problems as today, if not exacerbated. The more we keep ignoring it, the worse it will get. So it'll get worse. Which, yeah, it makes sense. I think that Vice summed it up well, which is that Zuckerberg announces fantasy world where Facebook is not a horrible company, right? Because like Facebook is facing all of these issues right now. Like there are tons of documents coming out about how they run their business and all the oversights they have and all the different ways that they have managed to not pay attention to the ethical quandaries that they find themselves in repeatedly, given the size and scope of their platform and the influence that their platform has on politics and people's worldviews and all of this. And then they're trying to be like, also, we should be the stewards of the internet going forward. It should be us and only us, and we should have full control of this like virtual world we're creating. And like these ideas just don't square. They don't square at all. Speaking of the metaverse, one of the other companies that wants to be heavily involved in it, Epic Games, had a very fun moment. Not a fun moment. The boss of Epic Games has decided that he really doesn't like the billionaire tax. I wonder why. Could be that maybe he's a billionaire. I don't know. That's a crazy thought. But not only does he not like it, he also has sort of like, from a point of at the very least misunderstanding how it would work, has decried it. So yeah, he has basically contended that if the billionaire's tax was in place, then he would have had to have paid, like basically liquidated all of his ownership of Epic, because Epic's value has doubled so many times in the past 5 years. Yeah, he said 8 times in the past 5 years. If this tax scheme had been in place, I'd have been forced to liquidate nearly my entire ownership. And that sounds like, oh no, that would be very, that would be unfair or something like that. Which I mean, whatever, he'd still have tons of money. But even if we go by those standards, right? The issue with that, as pointed out by Kotaku, where yes, I used to work, is that that's not actually how the billionaire's tax, as it's currently being discussed in Congress, would even work. So, as Kotaku points out, while tradable assets like stocks would be taxed when they went up in value, non-tradable assets, like say equity in a private video game company, which is what Epic is, would only be taxed when sold off. There's even a provision to allow billionaires to set aside literally $1 billion of their wealth as non-taxable under the plan. So, I mean, in so many different ways, somebody like Tim Sweeney would be totally safe and still wealthy beyond the imaginations of anybody that you are liable to meet in your day-to-day life. Like, none of us can comprehend how wealthy he would still be, even if this tax plan went into effect. So, and then like, yeah, he even made a suggestion that was like good. He was like, Sweeney suggests Congress should just raise the existing progressive income and capital gains taxes, which is like, yeah, a good idea. For those who don't know, capital gains tax is basically a tax that is on when your wealth in things like stocks and other forms of capital increases. And there's a very hard limit on that of 20% taxation relative to the hard limit on regular taxation on people like you and I, which is like 37%. And that's part of the reason why rich people pay so fewer taxes than regular people. But anyway, so yeah, he's just like, we should increase the existing progressive income and capital gains taxes. We should. But yeah, a bunch of lawmakers are against that, so that won't happen. So this is the means of getting around that. But people like Tim Sweeney are also decrying that. So then at some point it just becomes a matter of people saying, we just shouldn't tax rich people more. And that's just tedious. Anyway, let's see. Should I go to this one? This one's just depressing. No, I'm going to go to something like a little bit more lighthearted first, which is that Microsoft showed off more Halo this week. And you know what? it actually looks pretty good, which is, I think, not something people were expecting, because when it was kind of debuted, at least in gameplay form last year, it left something to be desired. I mean, it looked like Halo, but it looked like Halo that had some graphical issues, which is to be expected because it was still a ways out from release. But people were underwhelmed. And the kind of new stuff that they've shown off seems much more like a successor to the Halos of yore, as opposed to maybe Halo 5, which was bad. Sorry, everyone who liked Halo 5. It was really bad.
Humanity is fighting for survival. The banished have risen, defeated our heroes.
Yeah, let's see. Okay, so this is all neat and stuff. Let's get into some. This is just story stuff.
We will meet.
Show us the shooting. Yeah.
Is that you?
You're safe now.
So I mean, again, it still looks like Halo, but it looks pretty nice. And I mean, I personally very much like the idea of a, oh yeah, not the brute meme. Yeah, I mean, call him by his name. His name is Craig. He has feelings, probably. That's actually the thing they spent all this time on, is instead of improving the game, they're like, we're going to give the best AI in Halo history, which is already an accomplishment because Halo has really good AI. Like, we're going to give him the most lifelike AI ever. He's going to have thoughts and feelings and emotions. We're going to make a Craig simulator. We've actually canceled the rest of the game. But no, I mean, this looks like Halo, but like more open. And I think one of the things that Halo games have traditionally suffered from is when they like run out of open spaces, when you go to levels that are more confined and you're in a bunch of hallways. But I mean, like, the best parts of Halo 1 were, you know, just running around on the surface of the ring and figuring out how you're going to tackle various encounters.
What do we have here?
And this seems like that idea expanded finally after so many games that were like, let's, you know, also do some kind of more enclosed Call of Duty kind of stuff. And people were just always mystified by that, going back as far as like Halo 2. And I mean, Halo 2, I think it was a product of, you know, them not having time to really finish the game satisfyingly.
Could be useful,
but
if you like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think this is just finally getting back to, you know, what Halo is good at and making that the focus of the full game as opposed to only certain levels in it. So
Halo Infinite allows us all to become
I am
Master
cautiously
Chief,
optimistic,
doing
but
what
we'll see.
Spartans do best.
Anyway, also, I mean, yeah, look at that.
Look
Look at that. That's dope. That whole little sequence right there. That was dope as heck.
This won't be an easy fight. Master Chief will take on returning favorites
Like Craig.
and surprising new threats like the agile skimmers.
But yeah, anyway, so that's Halo. I am excited for it. A thing that I have more mixed feelings about is the leak of a very strange fighting game. So earlier this week, word got out of Warner Brothers Multiversus. And the reason why people are lending credibility to this leak is that every time anything about it comes out, every time anybody posts a screenshot or a YouTube video where they have some information on it, Warner Brothers DMCA's it. So that seems like it's probably something they don't want out there, meaning it's probably not fake. There was originally a screenshot here of kind of some of the character roster, which is what they're outlining right here. But yeah, so I mean, like, it's gonna be an interesting selection. You have Steven Universe. You have, I think it was Finn from Adventure Time, Batman and Harley Quinn, Superman and Wonder Woman, Gandalf, my favorite fighting game character. Can't wait to see him have a showdown with Superman, Rick and Morty, Tom and Jerry, Bugs Bunny, and then like some kind of a new original character, though I think I'd seen that character somewhere. Anyway, yeah, just kind of a weird lineup. Like, I don't know. This makes maybe more, less, or the same amount of sense as the Nickelodeon Smash Brothers ripoff. But yeah, I mean, we have all these, like, I think to go back to the metaverse, right? Like, we have all of these attempted brand crossovers happening right now because all of these companies see this as like ways to extract more value from all of the different brands that like 4 different companies own. So these are all like basically, you know, these are all Warner properties, right? And so, yeah, like suddenly all these different companies that own everything in an almost monopolistic fashion are like, there's gold in them there hills. Let's exploit this for all it's worth. But like, does anybody want this? Is there really an appeal to seeing Rick and Morty beat up Gandalf? I don't know. like it sounds funny on paper, but if the whole appeal, as it was with the Nickelodeon game, is just look, they're all in one place, but it doesn't actually play that well, and it's not that interesting, then again, we go back to the metaverse problem. What's the appeal of this? Who's it for? How will it have any lasting appeal at all? So I don't know. I do, though, find the idea of Gandalf in a fighting game to be incredibly funny. So at least there's that. Oh yeah, some of the most important news of the week as we kind of wind things down here. Timothee Chalamet, the Hollywood heartthrob and man boy wonder, used to be an Xbox 360 controller customization YouTuber, which, I mean, talk about a glow up. Yeah, no, like he used to do videos where he showed off Xbox controllers he made, which is like, you know, kind of cool. I mean, among the things you could be a YouTuber of, one of the more innocuous ones, right? Like, I think that in the future, we're going to have like Hollywood movie stars who used to like go on YouTube and say really vile stuff, or at least like get mad every time that Fortnite did an update and it wasn't exactly what they wanted. They're going to be like, it's a dead game and I hate it. Oh my God, these developers are so lazy. They're just going to like have these massive video archives of them being as toxic as possible. And at least this is just like, you know, he was a kid being like, look at what I did to my Xbox controller. It's so neat.
What's good, YouTube? This is Modded Controller 360 with the Controller of the Week. Here's Red Tiger. Started it today. Yesterday, finished it today. It looks nice. It looks sexy. Here's the back.
It looks nice. It looks sexy.
Here's the front.
Said a very young Timothee Chalamet.
72. This is pretty much what it would look like. And again, I have you for $10 plus shipping and handling and the new controller. This one specifically, this is going to Stud Muffins. This is a gamer tag. I'm not going to give out the full gamer tag, but Stud Muffins. This is going to be 15 for him.
Man.
So
I'm very jealous of Stud Muffins.
Again, suggest colors for next week. One suggests was purple jet.
Purple jet.
Jet black, I mean. And
wow,
purple.
jet black. Okay, never
and
mind.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to do that next week. Again, subscribe if you want. Comment below.
Congrats to Stud Muffins. Yeah, and if you're watching, please sell me the Timothee Chalamet controller. Man, you have to think about that too. Like, if anybody still has these controllers, they suddenly became worth so much money. Like, imagine if you bought a random Xbox controller from some kid online, and then suddenly you're like, oh, now this is worth $1 million. Like, that's bonkers. By the way, not to give away my news stories, but I should report out trying to find the people who bought these controllers, because I would read that, so I should write that. Anyway, if there are any journalists watching, don't take this idea. It's mine. Original content, do not steal. Speaking of original content that shouldn't be stolen, we have someone who clearly has never interacted with the OC side of the Sonic fandom, because if he had, Idris Elba, incredible actor, obviously, one of the most attractive human beings alive, had to divert the idea that he would make Knuckles in the Sonic the Hedgehog movie sequel sexy, because he just kind of intrinsically makes so many other roles that way. And so he was like, no, the cartoon hedgehog is not going to be hot. But see, there's a problem with this, which is that he clearly doesn't understand the dynamic of people making the cartoon hedgehog hot, which is what they've been doing for decades now. Sonic the Hedgehog characters are notorious for being co-opted by audiences into oftentimes definitely sexual fan art and fan fiction. And so it's very funny to me that he was like, no. He's like, yeah, honestly, I can't say contractually, I cannot say anything, but I wouldn't say he was sexy. I don't think I'm going for that. That's for sure. And yeah, again, I'm sorry, Idris Elba, but the people do not care what you want. So to really bring that idea home, I need to show the world an OC that I did not create, mind you, but basically, like, I don't know if y'all have ever played this game. If you want to have a really good time, like with your friends while you're hanging out, or like you're out for drinks or something, what you need to do is each of you should pull out your phone and search your name, the Hedgehog. Usually just your first name, last name is too specific. But anyway, whatever the first result is your hedgehog OC. So a couple weeks ago, I did this with some friends and I found mine. And mine is beautiful and perfect, and I love him like a son. I'm going to show you him. His name is Nate the Hedgehog. And he definitely is like a parody of this whole idea, but he's so good. He's so perfect. There's so many incredible details here. And he has like a whole backstory and likes and dislikes. So yeah, I've just got to point out some highlights here, which is that his powers are super calves, shoulder pads, My Chemical Romance, stone skin, running fast, good fashion, strong, and my personal favorite, telekinesis like Professor X from the X-Men. And then like, yeah, I mean, it all checks out. Like, look at that. Shoulder pads are right there. He's got the super calves. They look very painful, but I'm sure that they help him go fast. Just the main thing you need to do when you're a Sonic character. And also, every single one of those powers has an in-description explanation. This backstory, this giant paragraph covers all of it, including his likes and dislikes in a way that actually is narratively satisfying. Okay, so let's see. He was born from stone. That's right, from a rock. When Eggman used his Chaos Emerald on it, because he was from stone, he's very stoic. See, that's why he doesn't like or dislike anything. Never smiled or showed emotion. He doesn't talk either and relies on telekinesis. He was super strong as a rock, and Eggman used him to fight Sonic and Luke, who I guess is a made-up character. But then he went away from the evil and now fights against the darkness with his light magic. He now sides with neither good or evil as a true neutral. He travels the world to help save society. From his travels, he develops super calves, again, another explanation, to run fast, and delts to help him glide through the air. He is the first hedgehog ever to grow a cool beard. That's right, the first one. You can fact check that. The shoulder pads he wears are cool and made of diamond and steel. Wow, very powerful shoulder pads. His shoes are Gucci brand greenies and helps him run faster than Sonic and Shadow combined. That's incredible. He listens to My Chemical Romance when he fights the baddies. To this day, he still doesn't say a word and still wear his shoes made by Gucci. So now, I hope Idris Elba, if you're watching, you understand what's about to happen to you. They're going to be like 40 or 50 of these guys all based on you, and that's a conservative estimate. So get ready, because like, you know, obviously this one's very sexy, and like yours are probably going to be much sexier. Anyway, on that note, thank you everyone for tuning in this week. It's been a joy having you. Thank you to everyone who stuck around after our men segment. I know that this evolved into something maybe very different than you were expecting, but that's what happens every week. This is what brand building looks like. Anyway, we do this every week at 4 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, always covering a different story, different guests, different everything, but same basic idea, same basic format. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And of course, more importantly than anything, go spread the good word of Nate the Hedgehog, who has a very cool beard. I'll see you next week.